Greetings, helium breathers. We just completed day one of gasworld's Helium Super Summit, and I'd like to bring you up to speed on what I learned today. So first of all, it's important to realize that helium is a unique molecule that is the only substance that works in most of its applications. I mean, diving is a good example. There is no other gas that is light, inert, and non-narcotic in place of helium for deep diving. Helium is it. There are some other substitutions, but they're just not as good. And that is true for other applications as well, like semiconductor manufacturing and MRIs. Second, it's important to realize that the helium business has very much been an oligopoly controlled by 6 companies. Air Products, Linde, Air Liquide, Messer, which just bought the government's BLM facilities. I'll talk a little about that. And Matheson and Iwatani. And together, these companies control 75% of the world's helium supply. But their position in the market is starting to fray a little. And it's always been the case. The supply chain is very fragile and opaque. Much of the helium is sold via contracts, so prices aren't very visible. And the fragility, we saw that really with helium shortage 4.0, which went on for a couple of years and just ended earlier in this year. This was caused by outages in some key plants, the BLM in Qatar, and problems in Russia. The good news is helium shortage 4.0 is over. And again, that was the 4th shortage in 20 years. So it's a very fragile market. Demand-wise, globally, semiconductor manufacturing and electronics represents about 21% of demand, MRIs and healthcare about 15%, and then lifting, which includes vehicles and balloons and space rockets, about 14%. Interesting, diving globally is about 4% of helium use and 5% in the US. And worldwide, the demand this year in 2024 is about 6 billion cubic feet, of which the US demand is about 1.9 billion cubic feet, and then we export the rest. I'll talk about supply in a little while. And demand for helium right now is growing at about 2 to 3%, so pretty slow growth. The good news is that supply is expected to exceed demand over the next decade. So currently, North America is the #1 producer of about 3.1 billion cubic feet. This comes from BLM, the LaBarge facility owned by Exxon, and a new project coming up called the Dry Piney Project. Qatar has a supply of about 2.3 billion cubic feet, so they're #2. Russia and Asia about 0.6 billion cubic feet, and then Europe 0.5 cubic feet, for a total supply of about 6.5 billion cubic feet. And this is expected to grow to 8.6 billion cubic feet in 2029. And the reasons for that are mainly twofold. #1, the Russian Amur plants are coming online. The fact that there was a fire, they didn't get started in time, was part of the cause of helium shortage 4.0. But now they are coming online, and overall Russian reserves will represent about 30% of global reserves. Next, so they're building 3 plants now in the process over the next few years. Qatar, which is currently the #2 producer, is expected to add 2 plants. Between the two, Russia and Qatar, that's going to increase global capacity by about 50%. So the helium world is becoming less US-centric. In fact, in 1998, US supplied 85% of the world's helium. Today, it's about 47%. And in 2029, 5 years from now, it's expected to be about 35%. In 2029, the expectation is that Qatar will be the #1 producer, US will be #2, and then followed by Russia. There's also a lot of exploration going on. They euphemistically refer to it as the helium rush of 2015, but it's been going on for a while. It got accelerated during this last shortage. And so currently there are about 60 small oil and gas companies exploring for helium. There's work in the US, Minnesota, New Mexico, Arizona, Canada, South Africa, Tanzania, Europe, and Asia. Pretty interesting. A lot of companies, about 20 of these companies are public and the rest are smaller startups. So that's pretty interesting. However, the global supply chain remains very fragile, and subject to geopolitical events. Certainly the war in Ukraine has had a big impact, and the new European Union sanctions on Russian helium that just went into effect in September. So that means that whereas Russian helium used to come to the Europe and US, it's now going to China primarily and Asia. Also, a widening war in the Middle East could disrupt supplies from Qatar. Most of that liquid helium, which is how it's shipped primarily, goes through the Straits of Hormuz. So and that's where they've been firing rockets and causing problems. So if those get shut down, that again could cause a shortage. And then there's some plant outage issues. Messer bought the BLM system earlier this year, but there's some legal disputes. The plant is running now, but the legal disputes could cause it to shut down temporarily. And again, this would have a huge impact on the market. Currently, the BLM system, now owned by Messer, represents 23 active wells, storage capacity of 35 billion cubic feet. So that's a huge storage capacity. And storage is important to being able to balance supply and demand. Without storage, if demand exceeds supply, the price is going to go up because it can't meet the need. And in the reverse, if supply is greater than demand, price is going to fall. Storage is the balancing medium. And also with the BLM, there's about 423 miles of pipeline that go with it. So the bottom line is that pricing is likely to soften in the coming years, this year and going forward, as supply will exceed demand. It exceeds demand this year, assuming there are no big disruptions. But you know how prices are, they don't immediately fall, they're sticky, right? But the good news is we can expect not to see more price increases, and there should be good availability. That's what I have for you today. Hope you enjoyed it. Down below, you'll find links to last year's summit and some of our helium stories. And be sure to check out Gasworld, who's sponsoring this event. Thank you.